Our psalm today comes from Psalm 123. It's a very beautiful psalm. I recommend it if you would like to meditate on it today. St. John Chrysostom, he puts the historical context of the psalm as it's an experience of grief from the people, Israelite people, that stems from their captivity. It's basically them experiencing this pressure that's weighing upon them heavily in post-exilic times under the power of Persia. So they're away from their home, and they're suffering with this. They're feeling this distress. And so in this psalm, they're kind of turning towards the Lord in dependency of Him. And so the first line, the psalm mainly speaks about abandonment and complete dependency on God the Father. And the first line says beautifully, "To you, O Lord, I lift up my eyes." Now, we think of that as kind of just a mere physical gesture. I lift up my eyes. Well, we lift up our eyes at many things, but it has such a deeper level of meaning to it because it starts with not, I lift up my eyes to you, but to you I lift up my eyes. So the motivation, the causality of that movement of the eyes is you, Lord. It's the Lord who's generating this movement, this dependency on Christ, on God ultimately. And so it's sort of, that line is sort of like somebody hitting the bottom pit. They're crushed. There's nothing left. Where do I turn my eyes? For if not to heaven, then I turn towards the dirt of the earth. It speaks of the heart, just this one line. To you, O Lord, I lift up my eyes. It speaks of the heart being lifted up to God. And we can recall the prodigal son seeking to go back to his father when he lifted up his eyes from eating with the pigs and the dirt. And he recalls his father, and he has an image of the father, and his eyes are lifted up. I'm going to go home, go back to my father. To you, O Lord, I lift up my eyes. And we also think of Christ, the lifting up eyes of Christ when he's dying on the cross, and he turns his eyes to the Father and says, I thirst. So in his sacred humanity, in that death on the cross, he's lifting up his eyes. He's lifting his heart to the Father in the midst of everything that is opposed to goodness, to truth, to beauty, which is the cross. He lifts up his eyes in the midst of that utter poverty that he experiences on the cross. And then in the Eucharistic prayer number 1 that we occasionally pray, it says, he took bread and raised his eyes to heaven. And literally, as the priest, you have to make that gesture with your eyes. It's part of the rubric. So you have to actually make your eyes go up, to lift up your eyes. And so this turning, this lifting up the eyes isn't turning because we are innocent. That, oh, look how innocent I am and perfect I am. And I'm being unjustly condemned with this situation. It's not. We're not innocent. In a sense, we may even deserve it. But this is part of God's providence. Divine providence has permitted us to be captive. And you can think of all sorts of situations that we can be captive where we have to lift up our eyes to God. And the Lord permits this captivity. It could be an illness. It could be a family situation. You can expand it to all sorts of things. He permits it so that we would be humbled. He wants us to be humbled. He wants us to kind of really feel our creatureness, that I am a creature. I don't know if you ever, it's kind of like sometimes if you ever been embarrassed by how you acted towards somebody, and you're like, oh, I just acted like a moron. I just sinned. And the Lord permits that because He wants you to feel that sense of your creatureness, that I am a creature in need of a Savior. It's not a fun experience, but the experience of humility is a real good gift there. Because He wants to give us the opportunity to lift up our eyes to the one whose eyes of merciful love are eagerly awaiting this gift of self, this gift of our lives back to the divine giver. His eyes thirst for our love to the point that he permits situations that enroll us in the school of dependency. In the school of dependency. When I was just at a hospital a while ago, I told all the people surrounding their sick relative, I said, this doesn't look like a grace right now, but it is a grace. You're being invited in the school of dependency. The school to be dependent on God, to realize your creatureness, that you are a creature who needs a creator. It's a school that creates a solitude between God and I, a face-to-face drama, a decision to be made before the light of truth. All he asks of me is to turn, to move my heart, my eyes, and say, I cannot do it. I cannot manage. I surrender. You are all I have, Lord. Kyrios. You are my Lord. To you I lift up my eyes. If we can get that today, that utter dependency on Christ in the Eucharist, and to depend completely on him, we're saints. We are really saints. If we can thrust everything that we have into the heart of Christ in dependency and childlike dependency, we are saints. And in that we will be compassionate to so many others. Because when we realize how dependent we are on God, we're going to be so compassionate to others. Because we see that everything is a gift, and we want to share that gift with others. So let's, at this Holy Eucharist, let's lift up our eyes to God. Let's give everything to him in utter dependency and say, I really can't do it. I really can't manage. I am a failure. But with you, all things are possible.